Have you ever posted something in a group chat? Maybe your kid got a full-ride scholarship, or your spouse surprised you with a designer bag after years of grinding, and watched the read receipts climb while the chat stays dead silent for 30 minutes straight, until someone finally changes the subject to something completely unrelated, and you're left lying in bed that night wondering why you even shared it in the first place. Feeling that strange cocktail of pride and regret swirling in your chest like you committed some unspoken social crime nobody warned you about? That hollow feeling is not random, it is not just your imagination, and it is definitely not because your friends are too busy to type 3 words of congratulations. And today we are going to rip open the psychology behind why flaunting your money or success after a certain age quietly destroys your relationships, drains your peace, and even puts your actual financial security at risk in ways most people never see coming until the damage is already done. Let us get straight into the first brutal truth you need to hear, which comes from American social psychologist Leon Festinger and his social comparison theory, a framework that explains one of the most deeply wired instincts in the human brain, which is the compulsive need to measure ourselves against people we perceive as being in the same tier of life as us. Humans are hardwired to feel a sense of comfort and safety when they look around their peer group and see people who are roughly in the same boat, earning similar incomes, driving similar cars, dealing with similar struggles, because that equality signals that the social hierarchy is stable and nobody is threatening anyone else's position. But the moment one person in that group sends a signal, whether intentional or not, that says I have pulled ahead of you, I am no longer on your level, the brain does not process that as neutral information the way it would process a weather report or a sports score. It processes it as a direct threat to one's own status and self-worth. And the emotional response that follows is not admiration. It is a primal defensive hostility disguised under a thin smile. Consider the story of Linda, a 52-year-old woman from suburban Ohio whose daughter married a surgeon. And Linda was so overjoyed, so proud after decades of sacrifice and struggle, that she could not stop talking about it at her book club and her neighborhood gatherings, casually mentioning the luxury gifts her son-in-law bought her, the vacations they were planning, the new car that showed up in her driveway, and in her mind she was simply sharing her happiness with women she had known for 20 or 30 years, women who had seen her at her lowest, women she considered sisters. But what actually happened was far uglier than she ever anticipated. Behind her back, the group started a separate text thread she was not included in, and the tone in that thread was pure venom. Comments like, "Oh sure, her daughter married a doctor, but give it 2 years and he will be cheating," or "Must be nice to have a rich son-in-law doing everything for you since you never could do it yourself." And within 3 months Linda noticed she was no longer being invited to dinners. Her calls were going to voicemail, and the women who used to confide in her were now giving her one-word answers and polite but empty smiles. Linda became the public enemy of her own social circle without ever raising her voice or saying a single cruel word, and the weapon that destroyed her friendships was nothing more than her own joy spoken too loudly in a room full of people who were quietly struggling with their own disappointments. This is human nature operating exactly as evolution designed it, because in our ancestral environment, when one member of a tribe suddenly accumulated more resources than everyone else, the rest of the tribe had 2 options. Either form an alliance to take those resources back or ostracize that person to neutralize the threat. And our modern brains still run that ancient software even though we live in suburbs and communicate through smartphones instead of gathered around fires. The critical lesson here is that the moment you put your happiness on display for others to witness, you are not creating an audience of admirers who will clap for you. You are assembling a jury of people who now have a subconscious motivation to see you fall, because your success makes their stagnation feel unbearable. And the easiest way to relieve that discomfort is to find reasons why you do not actually deserve what you have or to predict that it will all come crashing down soon. Now let us move to the second psychological secret, which comes from Alfred Adler and his concept of the superiority complex. Because Adler spent his career studying why certain people feel compelled to constantly broadcast their achievements and possessions, and his conclusion was counterintuitive but devastating. The people who boast the most are not the ones with the most genuine confidence. They are the ones with the deepest unhealed feelings of inadequacy. Because a person who truly believes in their own worth at a cellular level simply does not need external applause to feel whole. They carry a quiet certainty that does not require validation from anyone. And so when you see someone who cannot resist dropping hints about their net worth or their new kitchen renovation or their child's acceptance to an Ivy League school, what you are actually witnessing is not strength. It is a wound crying out for attention. It is a soul screaming, "Please see me. Please tell me I matter. Please confirm that all those years of suffering were worth something." Take the case of Jennifer, a 48-year-old woman from the Dallas area whose husband's tech startup finally hit it big after years of barely scraping by. And the first thing Jennifer did was lease a Mercedes. Not because she particularly loved the car, but because she loved placing the key fob on the table at brunch where everyone could see it, and she developed a habit of weaving humble complaints into every conversation. Things like, honestly, driving a luxury car is exhausting because you are paranoid about every little scratch, or the maintenance on European cars is just absurd, but what can you do? And she thought she was being subtle, but every woman at that table knew exactly what she was doing and resented her for it. But the real price Jennifer paid was not just social isolation, it was financial exposure. Because once word spread through her extended network that her family had come into serious money, the vultures started circling in ways she never expected. A cousin she had not spoken to in 15 years suddenly needed $30,000 for emergency surgery. A college friend appeared out of nowhere with a can't-miss investment opportunity that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. Her neighbor started bringing up how tough things were financially with a look that was clearly building toward asking for a loan. And Jennifer found herself trapped in an impossible position where saying no made her the villain who changed after getting rich. But saying yes meant hemorrhaging the very wealth she had worked so hard to build. She had become a human ATM for every person in her orbit. And it all started because she could not resist the dopamine hit of watching people's eyes widen when they realized how much money she had. Remember this, other people's envy is not a compliment. It is the beginning of their greed. And every time you reveal what you have, you are essentially painting a target on your back for everyone who wants a piece of it, whether through guilt trips, manipulation, bad investment advice, or outright scams. And the only armor that truly protects your wealth and your peace of mind is silence. Keeping your mouth shut about your finances is not modesty or false humility. It is the single most powerful defensive strategy you have against a world full of people who will gladly drain you dry while smiling to your face. The thicker your wallet gets, the tighter your lips need to stay, period. The third framework we need to examine is self-determination theory, developed by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, which spent decades studying what actually makes human beings happy in a deep and lasting way versus what provides only shallow temporary spikes of pleasure that quickly fade and leave you needing more. Their research conclusively showed that lasting well-being comes from three internal sources: autonomy, which is feeling that you are the author of your own life; competence, which is feeling that you are growing and mastering things that matter to you; and relatedness, which is feeling genuinely connected to other humans in authentic ways. And nowhere on that list will you find external validation or the admiration of acquaintances, because those things produce what psychologists call extrinsic motivation, which is like burning newspaper to heat your house. It flares up bright and hot for a moment but leaves you cold again almost immediately, and now you need to find more fuel. Patricia was 55, living in a beautiful home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she had spent her entire adult life measuring her worth by how others perceived her, curating every outfit, every vacation photo, every dinner party to project an image of effortless success. And when someone said to her, "Oh, you are so lucky," or "Wow, I wish I had your life," she felt a brief surge of warmth that lasted maybe 60 seconds before the emptiness crept back in, and then she would immediately begin hunting for the next thing she could show off to get another hit of that feeling, cycling endlessly through purchases and announcements and carefully staged moments, none of which ever filled the void, because the void was not caused by a lack of admiration, it was caused by a complete disconnection from her own internal sense of self-worth. She had outsourced her entire identity to the opinions of others, And when you do that, you become a puppet whose strings are pulled by every passing glance and offhand comment, which is no way to live, especially in the second half of life when your deepest need is not applause but peace. Your late 40s and your 50s and beyond are the autumn of your life, and autumn is not the season for putting on flashy displays of new growth. It is the season for drawing your energy inward, strengthening your roots, storing up warmth for the winter ahead. And when you understand this metaphor not just intellectually but in your bones, you stop chasing the quick sugar rush of other people's admiration and start investing in the slow, steady nourishment of genuine self-respect, which is the only form of confidence that cannot be taken from you by gossip, jealousy, or changing circumstances. So let us talk about what to actually do with all of this knowledge, because understanding the psychology is only useful if it changes your behavior in concrete ways that protect your peace and your wallet and your relationships going forward. The first practice is what I call the listening Sabbath, and it works like this: at least 3 days out of every week, when you are in social situations, you make a commitment to say absolutely nothing about yourself, your family's achievements, your purchases, your vacations, nothing. And instead you pour 100% of your energy into asking questions and listening to other people talk about their lives. When someone shares something they are proud of, you give them a genuine warm response. You say, "That is incredible. Tell me more about how that happened." And you let them have the spotlight completely without any urge to redirect it back to yourself. What happens when you do this consistently is almost magical, because people walk away from conversations with you feeling heard and valued and important, and they attribute those good feelings to your presence, which means they start seeking you out, wanting to spend time with you, telling others what a wonderful person you are. And you achieve more social capital through silence and generosity of attention than you ever could through 100 stories about your new kitchen or your daughter's promotion. The second practice is cultivating what I call selective solitude, which means deliberately spending time alone doing things purely for your own enjoyment without any intention of sharing them with anyone. No photos for social media, no anecdotes to save for later retelling. Just experiences that exist solely between you and the moment itself. Go to a coffee shop and write in a journal that no one will ever read. Take a walk through a park and notice the light filtering through the trees without pulling out your phone. Cook a meal that tastes incredible and eat it slowly without telling a single soul about the recipe. And what these practices build over time is what I call the muscle of self-sufficiency, which is the deep, unshakable knowledge that your life has value and beauty even when absolutely no one is watching, even when there will never be a witness. And once that muscle is strong, the compulsion to seek validation from others simply withers away because you no longer need it. You are already full. The third practice is strategic downplaying, and this is not dishonesty, it is wisdom, because there will inevitably be situations where money or success comes up in conversation and you cannot gracefully dodge the topic entirely. And in those moments your move is always to minimize, to equalize, to bring yourself down to the same level as whoever you are speaking with, saying things like, "Honestly, after taxes and insurance and the kids' tuition there is barely anything left," or "You know how it is. Everything looks good on the outside but the bills never stop coming." And when you do this, the other person feels a wave of relief because you have just told them that you are still in the same struggle they are, that you have not left them behind, that the hierarchy between you has not changed, and that relief transforms into warmth and trust and genuine connection, which are worth infinitely more than the fleeting pleasure of watching someone's jaw drop at your new purchase. Making no enemies, provoking no envy, giving no one a reason to target you or gossip about you or exclude you. That is the ultimate skill for a peaceful and protected second half of life, and it costs you nothing except the momentary thrill of showing off, which, as we have already established, is a thrill that lasts about 60 seconds and leaves destruction in its wake for months or years afterward. Let me leave you with this final thought that I want you to carry with you from this moment forward. Bragging about money in the second half of life is borrowing happiness from your future self, because every time you flaunt what you have, you are spending down your social goodwill, your financial privacy, your relational security, and your inner peace all at once, and those are currencies that become harder and harder to replenish as you get older, and the interest rate on that borrowed happiness is loneliness, resentment, financial vulnerability. and the quiet gnawing knowledge that the people around you do not actually like you, they like what you have, and those are two devastatingly different things. Silence in this chapter of life is not merely golden, it is survival itself. It is the highest form of self-respect and dignity, because when you declare your own value out loud, that declaration actually cheapens you in the eyes of everyone who hears it. But when you keep your mouth closed, when you let your character and your kindness and your depth speak for themselves without ever mentioning a dollar amount or a brand name, your worth becomes something others can sense but never quite pin down, something mysterious and magnetic and unassailable, something that shines like a diamond precisely because it does not need to announce itself. If right now you are feeling that familiar itch to share something, to post something, to casually mention something that would make others see you in a more impressive light, I want you to pause, take a breath, and instead type these words in the comments or simply say them to yourself. I choose my own peace. That single sentence, spoken with intention, begins to rewire your brain away from the exhausting treadmill of external validation and toward the quiet, steady warmth of genuine self-acceptance, which is the only foundation strong enough to build a truly happy and secure life upon. And I hope that today marks the beginning of a new chapter for you, one where your confidence comes from within, where your wealth is protected by your wisdom, where your relationships are genuine because they are not poisoned by envy, and where you wake up each morning knowing that you are enough exactly as you are, with no need to prove it to anyone, ever.